and welcome to my vlog. My name is Erin and this is Diversity in World Building. Most of this should apply to any story that you're writing, but I am going to be leaning a little more towards fantasy world building. I'm just going to make a note before we start because although I am going to be listing multiple types of diversity, people are going to get hung up on racial diversity. Please be patient, watch through the whole video, and get informed on the different varieties and make the best choices for your story. Since this is a very long and in-depth topic, I will be covering it over 3 videos. I will be covering racial and ethnic diversity, disability and disfigurement, neurodivergence and mental health, sexual orientation and attraction, gender, age, socioeconomic status, body size, shape, and appearance, including harm in your writing, other things to look for such as stereotypes and coding, and what you can do to minimize issues in your writing. So, let's all check our privilege, check our biases, and approach this topic thoughtfully together. Number 1, racial and ethnic diversity. This is probably most often what comes to mind when people hear the word diversity. And don't get me wrong, it is incredibly important and you should absolutely be including it, but it is not the only type of diversity. A lot of people also think that this is exclusive to North America, specifically Canada and the US. But that's just not accurate. Yes, diversity issues are more visible in those countries, but there are mixed populations all over the globe. Even cultures that appear to be monocultures at first probably have a variety of ethnicities within them. Japan has the indigenous Ainu. England has a huge population of South Asian people. I mean, sure, if you look at a place and it is 80% one group, you may not notice the others right away, but that doesn't mean they're not there. And it also doesn't mean that they don't deserve representation in their own media. Think about what you're seeing in the media of your own countries, and ask yourself if there are groups that are being neglected in that representation. In case you're confused by the differences between race and ethnicity, we'll look into that a little bit more. Race is a socially constructed category of identification, which can be based on physical characteristics, ancestry, history, or culture. That being said, we are all human, and the social construct of race has no basis in biology. Ethnicity is a social group that shares a common culture, language, or religion. When people say black, white, or Asian, those are races. Ethnicity gets more complicated. If you say that you are Irish, Bengali, or Cree, those would be ethnicities. There are thousands of ethnicities that exist in the world today. India alone has around 6,000. So when you are working on world building or studying a location, those are things to be conscious of. Racial and ethnic discrimination is present across the globe. If you live in a country where there is not a racial minority, you're probably going to see discrimination based on ethnicity instead. 1.1. Fictionalized races. Even if you're writing a fictionalized version of a race or just choosing to write using a specific skin color, you need to be aware that that has different connotations in different areas. If you're writing a book in English, then it stands to reason that you're going to have readers in English-speaking countries. Take some time to research the different prejudices in those countries so that you can avoid major missteps. Racist tropes and stereotypes exist and you should absolutely be educating yourself on them so you can avoid them in your writing. You don't get a pass just because you are writing in a country where those things are not common. Take note of where your audiences could be and research accordingly. You also need to be aware of racial coding in your writing, but since coding in general applies to multiple categories, I will be addressing that later on. 1.2. Populations mixing. As I stated in my previous video about this topic, populations mix for a wide variety of reasons. Let's run down your options for this. Travel, immigration, and immigration covers all of the reasons that you would willingly go to another country: jobs, family, research, school, exploration, etc. There's also kidnapping, enslavement, exile, trade, fleeing war, persecution, or various disasters, colonialism and empire expansion, and nomadic lifestyles. There are probably more, but that is all I can think of right now, but I think that's a good start for you. The point is that it is very, very realistic for you to have a mixed population in your stories. When you are choosing the skin color for the group that is native to the region that your story is based, remember the effects of climate and geography, because the melanin levels are going to be very affected by their proximity to the equator. You're also definitely going to have ethnic groups within whatever kingdom, country, nation you've created. The more area you cover, the less homogeneous people are going to be. Don't worry, you do not have to develop every single one of them, just the ones that are relevant to your story. 1.3. Social attitudes and characters. What are the general social attitudes towards the different races and ethnicities that you have present in your story? I will have later videos on developing culture, so for now you only need to work on the social basics. Which groups are in power? Which is the native population and which group came there for whatever reason? How long ago did they come? Are there any restrictions against specific groups? If so, what are they and which groups did they apply to? If you're developing a fantasy world, you do not need to include racism. You could craft a society that has a whole new set of discrimination, or none at all. If you're working with a real setting, then you're going to want to do your research to find out how things are stacked in that location. You also want to know what your character's personal views are on whatever race or ethnicity they are. Is your character integrated into their culture? If they are divorced from it, what are the circumstances surrounding that? What are their personal views on the other races and ethnicities that you've included in your story, and how does it influence their interactions with those characters? Number 2, disability and disfigurement. Disability tends to get ignored a lot in media. Disfigurement often shows up in the form of cool scars given to badass characters, but is otherwise very rarely addressed. We're going to start off with the physical side of disability, and point number 3 will expand on the rest. A disfigurement is the altering of the appearance based on a birth defect, disease, or injury. And a disability is any physical or mental condition that limits a person's movement, senses, or activities. Disability can be looked at a few ways when you're deciding what to include in your story. 2.1. Is the disability visible or invisible? A visible disability is exactly that. It's visible. Things like paralysis, amputation, certain developmental or genetic disorders would count as visible disabilities. An invisible disability would be things like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, learning disorders, mental illness, diabetes, etc. Invisible disabilities can be made visible based on the assistive devices that people choose to use, such as hearing aids, glasses, wheelchairs, etc. Other invisible disabilities may become visible over time based on how they progress, such as with a muscular degenerative disorder. Do not be afraid to write characters that use assistive devices. Even if you are clinging to the idea that some device needs to exist in history for it to be valid to include, fear not, because people have been needing assistive devices all through time. Wheelchairs are historical fact. Glasses, prosthetic limbs, sign languages, and many other devices are historical fact too, so drop that excuse. 2.2. Disfigurement. There are a variety of superstitions as to why someone might be born with or develop a disfigurement, and they're all pretty shitty and blame the person for it. Technically, body modifications can also fall under disfigurements, but they don't carry the same type of stigma, so I'm not going to be talking about those. As I mentioned, the most common form of disfigurement that I have run across in media is scars. Scars are produced from any number of injury or illness. Some birth defects that can cause disfigurements are cleft lips and palate, club feet, and underdeveloped limbs. Some diseases that can cause disfigurement are cancer, various skin conditions like psoriasis and eczema, and smallpox and other similar diseases. The type and severity of the disfigurement will have to be taken into consideration to determine the effect that it will have on your characters. 2.3 is amputation. Amputation is the removal of a body part. It is typically focused around the loss of a limb or part of a limb, but some definitions also include the loss of any external body parts. The most common reason for amputation is actually circulatory disorders. Typically, it is to prevent the spread of infection or gangrene. This occurs fairly commonly with diabetes or sepsis. Other reasons for amputations are cancer, trauma and injury, congenital deformities, polydactylism, frostbite, and other infections. It may also occur as a legal punishment. There's also the phenomena of phantom limbs, in which people can still feel sensation or pain where the body part was despite it no longer being there. 2.4, the social versus medical model. When considering disabilities in your story, you want to consider whether the disability is an issue because of something medical, i.e. chronic pain, or if it's an issue because society is being a dick weasel. The negative aspects of many disabilities could be drastically reduced if society gave two fucks and provided the accommodations people need. Visual impairment is a disability, but it is so widespread and so many people wear glasses that it is not even really considered a disability until it progresses to the point that you need further assistance. There could be disabilities in your world that are so common they're completely normalized. Figure out to what degree your character is affected by their disability, how it affects them, and whether or not it is consistent or episodic. 2.5. When and how did they come about? Are the disabilities or disfigurements present at birth? Are they progressive? Do they become worse over time? Are they the result of an injury or an illness? Do they occur within the story? These will all impact how you're writing about them. If a character is new to experiencing a disability, then there's going to be an adjustment period for them. How you've set up the society in your story will affect this a lot. You'll want to know how each of your disabled or disfigured characters manage their condition on a day-to-day basis. What is available for them that helps them cope and navigate the world. 2.6. Allergies, intolerances, and dietary restrictions. I wasn't sure where exactly to put this, so I'm including it here because dietary restrictions can drastically affect someone's life, and they often face a lot of stigma against it. An allergen is an immune response, and an intolerance basically means that the body does not have something it needs to break it down. Depending on the severity, you may have some mild itching or digestive distress, or it could hospitalize you or cause a fatality. If you are giving a character an allergy or an intolerance, you need to understand how it affects them. How common is the trigger in their world? How easy is it to avoid? And what can be done if they come into contact with it? Dietary restrictions come into play for a lot of different reasons. Religion, personal preferences, moral objection, allergies, and intolerances, as I mentioned. Determine why your characters have a restriction. What are the societal views for it? What are their personal views for it? And how does it impact their day-to-day within the story? 2.7. Social attitudes and characters. Is there a social stigma against disability or disfigurement, or is society accepting? Is there a difference based on whether the disability or disfigurement was acquired or whether it was a congenital condition? How does your character feel about their particular condition? Do they have multiple conditions? What assistive measures and treatments do they personally utilize? How accessible and supportive is the society that you're developing or writing about? Characters with disability or disfigurement should not be filling the role of inspiration for able-bodied or non-disfigured characters. They should have personal agency, and they do not need to be cured in the story. They can just exist as the interesting and complex characters that they are without needing to be fixed. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful. The next world building video will be continuing on this topic in part 2 of 3. We'll be covering neurodivergence and mental health, sexual orientation and attraction, and gender in that video. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. If you'd like to be notified as soon as I upload, then ring that bell. All of my social media will be in the links below. Both of my books, Olympian Confessions, Hades and Persephone, and Olympian Confessions, Hera, are available now in ebook and paperback. If you would like your book critiqued by me, you can check out my new critique service. You can check out all of those on my website, links will be below. If you've enjoyed my videos and learned something from them, consider being part of my Patreon family. I will see you all next week with another video. Bye!